Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. I had a teacher in honors history in high school, Mr. Dahl. I loved Mr. Dahl as an instructor because he would say this, and this is my philosophy for today. My philosophy for today is, I'm going to make you uncomfortable today. And the reason for that is because if you're not uncomfortable, you don't learn. And actually, the way he put it is, if you're not uncomfortable, you don't think. If you don't think, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you don't grow. And if you're not growing, you're dying. And if you're dead, well, you're not here, right? And what a waste. What a shame. Today, we're going to be uncomfortable because we're going to think, we're going to grow, we're going to learn. And we're going to move. We're going to do what we're supposed to do on this planet, which is grow, learn, evolve, and come up with a new line of thinking. You know, I was impressed when I saw the thought behind Dr. Bo Kirkwood's book, A Purpose-Driven God, which I have right here in my grubby little paw, which if you're watching this on video, you see it in my hand right here. As I began to read it, I was even more impressed. And the reason behind this book is simply this. You know, we have two warring factions in the paranormal. There are those who say, I want to be a skeptic. I want to do a science-based paranormal investigation to prove that what we're looking for as far as life in the hereafter is real and science-driven. There's the other that says, I'm a believer and I believe in everything. And the skeptic side wins 8 times out of 10. There aren't too many just raw believers out there that just believe. I want to read something to you that's right out of page 146 in Dr. Bo Kirkwood's book, and I'll bring him in. It's a quote from John Lennox. It says, the problem for the atheist is the inability to distinguish mechanism from agency. In philosophical terms, they make a very elementary category mistake when they argue that because we understand a mechanism that accounts for a particular phenomena, there is no agent that designed that mechanism. He also says, for example, Kepler would not argue, and he's talking, and we'll explain this part, would not argue that because he discovered how planets orbit the sun, it required no agent. Kepler, of course, being a believer in God, the miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift, which we neither understand nor deserve. Okay, so pretty simple in that statement. I might have hit you with a little bit of a fire hose, is this. A mechanism just can't float out there. There has to be something behind it. And that's the basis of today's show with Dr. Bo Kirkwood, which let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Bo Kirkwood before we get going here. The man is intriguing in himself. Dr. Bo Kirkwood is a retired family physician who now serves as a hospice director for Heart to Heart Hospice in Southeast Texas. He graduated from the University of Houston with a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Houston of Clear Lake, with a master's degree in behavioral science and a medical degree from the University Health Science Center, Fort Worth, Texas, College of Osteopathic Medicine, North Texas University. After his internship at Garden City Hospital in Michigan, he practiced family medicine in Pasadena, Texas for over 36 years. He was a professor of medicine for Lincoln Memorial University Medical School, as well as an adjunct professor of medicine at McGovern Medical School in Houston, Baylor Medical School in Houston, and the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. Dr. Kirkwood has a special interest in Christian apologetics and intelligent design, and has lectured on these topics for many years, and with many of his lectures available on YouTube. So we'll point you in that direction after the show. He's also the author of 3 books, Unveiling the Da Vinci Code, The Evolution Delusion, and The Purpose-Driven God. We'll point you to those as well in the description of the show, and co-authored with his brothers as well. And he has also contributed articles to Truth Magazine as well as other publications. He's also spoken about evolution on Coast to Coast AM radio and other radio shows. Let's welcome him in to Darkness Radio for the very first time, Dr. Bo Kirkwood. Dr. Kirkwood, thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the most simple question to start this out today, and that is, why chase the topic of intelligent design? What brought you to the topic of intelligent design?
Well, I've been a Christian from a young age, but when I went into college and studying biology and other things, I was exposed, obviously, to evolution. Was exposed to that in high school as well. And in the course of my studies, I took a course called Population Genetics and Evolution by a PhD credentialed geneticist. And the very first day in class, he said, now the general theory of evolution belongs in a philosophical class or philosophy class, not in a science class. I had never heard that before.
Wow.
From someone with those kind of credentials behind him. And he went on to explain why he was making that statement early on in the class. He wasn't saying it from a religious standpoint. He was saying it from a scientific standpoint by saying there was just no evidence from genetics and from the fossil record and so forth that kinds can turn into different kinds from an evolutionary point of view. And that started me on a road to trying to look at things from a scientific point of view, examine evolution from a scientific point of view, and try not to just use the book of Genesis or the Bible as my sole source.
Right.
And as a result of that, I started studying the fossil record. I started studying DNA. And then along came in about 1990, which was about 20 years after that incident, the intelligent design movement started with Michael Denton, and then with Michael Behe and Stephen Meyer and Douglas Axe and so on and so forth. And I started seeing scientists that were saying, wait a second, there's not a lot of scientific evidence for what I would refer to as macroevolution, and certainly no evidence at all for molecules to man evolution, which says that life got started purely by random chance from chemicals that somehow got together to start RNA or DNA. And from that point of time until now, I've been studying the topic and reading what I can, and not just from the proponents of intelligent design, but people like Richard Dawkins as well that would be opponents of intelligent design. I can't say I'm totally unbiased. That wouldn't be true because I was raised in a Christian church.
Sure.
But I try to be unbiased, at least from the looking at the science. And that's what the first part of my book is about, trying to look at the science and see what is the best explanation from the scientific record, design or random chance. And of course, my conclusion is that there has to be design. That's a lot. I would say there has to be design. I'm just saying from a logical standpoint, that makes a lot more sense than believing in random chance and chance alone.
Well, the passage I cited is an excellent way and an excellent launching point, if I could, to start from and then build your way out. And you do that with the book. And that's why I was so interested in bringing you on the show, because this is a struggle in this community. And I know we have kind of went a little bit back and forth on email about why would you come on this show, and why would you want to explain what it is that you're trying to achieve with this book here, and why would you come on this show? Well, there's a very, believe it or not, strong tie between what you have in this book and what we do in this community. And that is, you have a lot of people in this community who say they struggle with faith. And this is what, and why I wanted you on the show, because you have a lot of people that struggle with, well, what is there in the afterlife? And how can you tie it to science? And what you've done with this book, even though there may be, I'd say as I read this book, I probably agree with 95% of what you have in this book, and a light bulb goes on. Oh, yeah. Because what you do is you tie a way of saying, okay, because you have skeptics and even cynics out there that say, well, how and forgive me for the language, but this is coming from other people. And they'll say, well, how do you believe in a sky daddy and this? And then try and tie it to science because they believe in the mechanism, right? The mechanism of what's there, and they hold that as a deity. Okay.
Right.
And they don't look at how you can take thousands of years of writings, whether it be in any religion, and try to hook up an intelligent design. The fact that, as you put it brilliantly in this book, the fact that this world itself may have been crafted for us. And look at it's not coincidence.
No.
And you break it down brilliantly, Dr. Kirkwood.
Well, thank you.
Everything from atoms, and you start with atoms, you go from atoms to scientific design in the way that I mean, man, I know I'm stumbling a little bit here, but you go from quantum mechanics to the respiratory system, to grass, how grass and photosynthesis is set up, to I mean, our bodily systems, to you talk about good and evil, and how you talk about theological systems and all of this, and how all of these designs, you talk about ants, how ants and the way that they are set up mimics the human systems, and how all of this, all these thoughts that I've had running through my head since I was a youngster. How did we acquire knowledge to do things like create fire? How do you acquire that out of nowhere?
The atheist would use, they like to use the word God of the gaps. You've probably heard that term before.
Yes.
And what they mean is that if we can't explain anything, then God did it. They're missing the point. And that's the whole quote from John Lennox that you gave. Just because I can understand how the Arctic turned, at least to a little bit, uses the navigational force that he had, the navigational aspects that they have to get from the North Pole to the South Pole, which is utterly amazing, which also involves the magnetic fields of the Earth and the sun and so forth. Just the fact that we can understand that a little bit it doesn't disprove deity. In fact, like Einstein says, the most amazing thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. Mm-hmm. And because of that, because it is comprehensible, it implies that there's logic behind it. There's a mind behind it. And that's my point of the book. The purpose of my book, A Purpose-Driven God, is to try to show how I have come to the conclusions that I have come to. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody else has to come to those same conclusions, but they're conclusions that I have come that I've come to. And in fact, the Bible says that we have to be ready as a Christian to give an answer for what we believe. Peter says that in his epistles. So if you can't give an answer for what you believe, then you kind of alluded to it a little bit, and that is you're believing on blind faith. And I do not believe that blind faith is what I, as a Christian, should have. It shouldn't be blind. It should be based upon the evidence. And I believe that the evidence strongly supports intelligence behind the universe. And that's the purpose for showing those few examples that I show in my book. How did they come about? Was it just random chance? It seems illogical for me to believe that.
One of the things, I want to hit I have a lot of skeptics who listen to this show. A lot of skeptics, Dr. Kirkwood. One of the things I want to hit them with right away is this. For those who think that you probably get on the pulpit right away with this book and start to hit them with the verses, so to speak, I say that with a smile and a wink. The first thing you bring up is William Wilberforce, who was the leader of the movement to abolish slavery in England. And the first thing you bring up is not that he was a Pollyanna type of person, but you bring up the fact that people by nature are not necessarily good.
No, they're not. By nature, they're not. And people will ask, why did I start with William Wilberforce? I thought it was a good starting place because he began as a member of Parliament with not a whole lot of purpose. He was a rabble-rouser. He was not a Christian when he began. He became a Christian when he entered into Parliament. And because of his position in Parliament, he was more or less sought out by the abolitionist movement there in Great Britain and the United Kingdom. And once he realized how heinous that was, the Slavery Institute itself, and how it violated every principle that you can think of from a Christian standpoint, then that became his purpose. His ultimate purpose was to be a Christian and to serve God. But his secondary purpose was to do what he could to abolish the slave trade in the United Kingdom. And it didn't come easy, as I pointed out in the book. It took decades, and he had a lot of help along the way. We mentioned John Newton in the book and other people as well that brought him along, but he persevered. And ultimately, before he left Parliament, the slave trade was abolished, and eventually slavery was abolished as well, and he lived long enough to see that as well. But my whole reason for starting with that chapter is there's an individual that had purpose, and we don't all have that kind of purpose. We all have different purposes in life, but to live a life without purpose, to me, is a very sad thing. to wake up each morning and all I've got to look forward to is enjoying pleasure and drinking and eating and whatever we do for pleasurable things. And then when life is over, that's it. And that there's absolutely no purpose in life at all. I can't live like that. That's not a very purposeful way to live. And I think it's a sad way to live. And yet I would say right now, the materialists seem to be winning out when it comes to that point of view, that philosophy, if you will.
And you address that in the book. You address the materialist point of view and the fact that being a materialist, you're just, I mean, some people would call it an atheist, not necessarily agnostic, but being a materialist, we'll call it being a materialist. Living just by impulses or day to day and thinking that there's nothing after this is living by the mechanism, living by the fact that we're just going day to day and living by pleasures.
And some people find comfort in that. A lot of people find comfort in that. If I don't have to worry, quote unquote, about an afterlife or accountability, then I can live a free life. And I mentioned Stephen Greenblatt in my book, who wrote the book The Swerve, which was introduced to me, by the way, by a family member. And I read the book, and it's a very good book, a Pulitzer Prize winning book and so forth. But he mentions his mother, who was Jewish, who worried about dying. Her whole thing was, it seemed like, especially towards the end of her life, she feared death. And the reason she feared death is she feared the afterlife. Greenblatt would say, if you can do away with that, then you can remove that fear of living and live a conscious-free life, if you will. And he found comfort in that. I don't find any comfort in that, to think that we're here for a short period of time, as James says, we're but a vapor, and then this is it, and it's all over. That gives me no comfort at all.
Why wouldn't that scare the hell out of you?
Right, it would. It does me, but for the materialist, somehow it's comforting. And I want to say real quickly that I'm not saying that materialists are evil people,
right? No,
or immoral people. Right. I wouldn't say that at all. I wouldn't say that about Stephen Greenblatt. I wouldn't say that about some of my loved ones. I wouldn't say that about a lot of people that I know that are either agnostic or they're just outright atheists, one or the other. They can be very moral people.
Yes, very much.
But I would have to question, where does that morality come from? Where does it actually come from to be a moral person? Why should I care about my fellow man if this is all there is? But they do, and I'm not saying they don't, but my opinion is it comes from a higher being.
And I get where you're coming from. If the mechanism, as you point out in the book, and again, I'm going to stress to people, a purpose-driven God, we have a link to it in the description of this program, and even to dig into, in 3/4 of the book, you're proving your point by pointing back to the science. And
right.
I wish we had enough time to go through every single scientific point in this book, Dr. Kirkwood, because I think it would blow people away.
It'd take us several hours, though.
It would. It would take us several hours to go over every single scientific point in the book. And I want to say to my friends that are atheistic, that are agnostic, that want to take apart every single scientific point, to look at the book, to go get the book, read the book, and you're going to have a hard time arguing everything that Dr. Kirkwood puts in here. As I went through it, and I went, you know what, I can't argue it. I just, there's a lot in here I just can't argue. Well, one of the things that I kind of wanted to save it for the second part of the program, but I don't think we have time to, and that's this. You bring up such things in the stars, such as dark matter, and one of the things you bring up is quantum mechanics. Now, there have been quite a few articles over the past few years, as long as we're talking life, death, afterlife. I want to bring up quantum mechanics because quantum mechanics has become a catchphrase lately in the paranormal community for this reason and this reason only. Science has married itself to quantum mechanics when it comes to the afterlife. It seems like this is the latest catchphrase now in the last 5 years with scientists, because they say, well, we can buy into an afterlife as long as it's a quantum mechanical quantum mechanical realm. So
I have not specifically heard it stated from that point of view, but I can understand it when you realize about the uncertainty principle that's in quantum mechanics, and that uncertainty principle allows for a lot of questions and a lot of unanswered questions to a large extent. And I don't propose to be an astrophysicist or a quantum mechanics specialist, but what little I do know is there is some uncertainty when it comes to the quantum realm, and that's proven by that double slit experiment that I talk about in my book.
Yeah.
We do not know why the double slit experiment works the way it works. Why, when you observe a particle going through the double slit, it looks one way. When you don't observe it, it looks another way. We don't know why that is, except that's just the way it is. There's a lot of that in medicine, in physics, by the way. There's a lot of things like we don't know why it is what it is. It just is what it is. And that gets back to my original premise in the book of how just exquisitely fine-tuned our universe is. And I believe quantum physics works. I believe that quantum physics is not fully explained yet. It's still a lot of things out there that we need to discover about quantum physics, but I believe it works. I believe the theory of relativity works. Now, as I point out in my book as well, there's a little bit of problem there because if I understand the mathematics that works for relativity doesn't work for quantum mechanics. That's the reason there's this attempt to find a unifying theory or a theory of everything, which scientists are still trying to discover, a string theory being at least one way to do that. But that's an interesting take on quantum mechanics that your viewers have. I haven't heard that point of view, but I can understand maybe where they get it from, because there's some weird stuff. Quantum entanglement, for one thing, is very hard for me to get my mind around, but it seems to work. The things that they talk about in quantum mechanics seems to be the way our universe does work, and we have a lot of technology today that we wouldn't have if the quantum mechanics hadn't come around.
Can you see, and just in your educated mind, can you see something like that happening where energy cannot be created nor destroyed? If the soul has to go somewhere after it leaves the body, would it be in the Creator's design that maybe that energy does just jump a little bit to the right or to the left?
Man, I don't know.
And it slips into this quantum realm, and that quantum realm is heaven?
I do believe, okay, we're getting into what I believe, not what I can prove, but I do believe that heaven is not a place.
Okay.
It's not a physical place.
Okay.
It could be a different energy. Okay. It could be a different dimension, which is what I tend to favor. But when we think of heaven or the hereafter, I don't think our energy, if you want to call our soul that energy, I don't have any problem with that. But if we're going to call it that, it goes to a realm that is unseen. Okay. And it's not part of the dimensions that we have. And that's the reason you can't speak to anyone that's died and come back yet. At least I haven't. Okay. Now, the Bible talks about the spirits that have died and that are still alive, if you look at the Old Testament and even the New Testament. But that's an interesting point of view. I'll have to think about it more, to be honest with you. But possibly I wouldn't have a big issue there. But I do believe there's something that happens after this life is over. And I do believe also there is an accountability. And I point out in my book, as you mentioned, I believe there's a dark side. There's a dark side of the spiritual world. And if today's current events don't prove that, nothing does.
We'll get into that in the second part of the program, because I do want to talk about duality and the fact that it does exist. I mean, you do start out the book by talking about the fact that people don't start out good. And I want to talk about duality and the fact that it exists and why it would exist if not by intelligent design. We'll talk about that here in the second part of the program. What I want to talk about briefly before we go to break here is this. I found it extremely fascinating that when you're talking about adaptation, instinct, and just those stories, you mix in animals with humans, and you talk about the physiology. And there's I don't think I can even get to the page fast enough, Doctor. You talk about the different processes that it takes for a human body to exist and to function. and the different processes that it takes. And there's one key, I'm trying to remember what the key component is that makes everything run. But the fact that all these processes have to come together in order to make a human body fire, it absolutely makes my jaw drop. And I took some pre-med courses in school, and I also took some psychology courses in school as well. But every time I read this passage, and I think to myself, you know, the human body itself is a modern miracle, but to have doctors, medical doctors that you know, they're the finest mechanics in the world, right? When you talk about a car mechanic is pretty simple. Someone who looks over the human body and goes, you know, if you take this chemical reaction, this chemical reaction, this chemical reaction, I think I can fix this. But it's never guaranteed, because even if you correct the chemical reaction, it doesn't necessarily mean the patient's going to pull through. Yeah,
and to some extent, I think what you may be talking about is irreducible complexity. You see that problem with irreducible complexity throughout all systems of the body. The designer, if there was a designer, which I think there was, designed animals similarly in the fact that we all have DNA, for example. Even plants have DNA. We're not talking about the fact that there's not some similarity between me and another animal, but there's a distinct difference between us, and that the fact that God made us in his image. But back to irreducible complexity, just think about the clotting mechanism, for example. There's at least 13 different factors that have to function for your blood to clot. And if your blood didn't clot, then you'd be dead. You wouldn't. Y'all would be dead. Your body has to be able to clot. It also has to be able to reverse that clotting mechanism too. By the way, if you didn't stop the clotting mechanism, then we'd all die of pulmonary embolism as well. If any one of those factors is removed, the clotting mechanism breaks down. The question is, and Michael Behe was excellent in talking about this. In fact, he coined the term irreducible complexity. How do you get to the end from an evolutionary standpoint? How do you get from factor 1 to factor 13? And that's just on the clotting mechanism. You see that all over. My book, I mentioned the ATP synthase. That ATP is how the body makes energy. By dephosphorylation from ATP to ADP, that's how we get energy. That's still not completely fully understood, by the way, but everybody understands that's the mechanism. Well, you need ATP synthase to reconvert ADP to ATP. If we didn't have ATP synthase, we wouldn't be here either. Well, it's sort of the chicken and the egg problem. Which came first, ATP synthase or ATP? Okay, and you see those chicken and the egg problems throughout the human body for sure. And in particular, in my book, we talk about the cardiovascular and respiratory system. You can't have one without the other. Yeah. One is useless without the other, and that's the reason for linking those two together in my book.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And I think people, we just take it for granted. We're walking, we're breathing. You know, if we happen to have one disease or another, we take a pill, that's it, we're good to go. And I think we simplify in our minds and in our hearts that, you know, doctors got it figured out. It's simple stuff. It's simple chemistry. It's not.
It's not. And the mechanism to get to that chemistry is not simple. Again, back to the plants and chlorophyll and so forth. The chemical equation for creating sunlight using carbon dioxide to carbohydrates may seem real simple. It's not as simple. The equation may be simple. The process is not simple at all. And how did that come about?
Right.
I think it's designed. That's my opinion.
The thing that blew me away recently, Doctor, I don't know if you've seen it online or not, but the thing that blew me away recently was the microscopic video of a plant breathing recently.
No, I haven't seen that.
You haven't
I'll have to look that up.
Oh my gosh. If you Google it, you can actually see the video of the microscopic opening and closing of the plant breathing, and it totally makes you rethink about plant life on this planet. It's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
And obviously plant life and animal life are interdependent on one another. Mm-hmm. One breathes out carbon dioxide, the other one brings it in. One produces oxygen, the other breathes it in. That synergistic system. Is that just chance that all that came about? That's what you have to believe. If you're the materialist or atheist, that's what you have to believe. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's also fascinating. And again, it's the way you've tied it together in this book. It's an absolutely fascinating. I was absolutely fascinated by the way you tied it all together. And again, I encourage people, and maybe you read Dr. Kirkwood's book and you go, I don't know if I believe in it. But again, folks, that's why we're here. We're here to look at different ways of thinking. And as I read this book, it was everything that I ever wanted to tie together and more. I thought, you know what? Why can't you believe in both? Why can't you believe in a higher power? And why can't you believe in the fact that everything is science driven? To me, it all made sense.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
That's what the scientist community would have us believe. That is, the science and religion are mutually exclusive. Why? Some of the greatest thinkers that have ever walked this planet, Isaac Newton, Johann Kepler, as we mentioned, James Clerk Maxwell, Pasteur, on and on and on and on and on, believed in God and practiced pretty good science, I would argue.
Yeah.
They practiced pretty good science. So why are they mutually exclusive? And I believe personally that the more we discover in the scientific realm is not more proof that there isn't a God, it's more proof that there is a God. They're not mutually exclusive. It's just some have a different worldview than the other. And there are very good scientists, some of them won't come out publicly and say so, that are believers. Yeah, but they're very good scientists who practice very good science, hard science that are believers. But yet they do a very good job doing what they do. So they are not mutually exclusive, as some people would have us to believe.
Let's do this, Dr. Kirkwood. Let's take our break. When we come back, we'll talk about good and evil. We'll talk about where it originates from, because obviously if people start out not so good, and we'll talk about the case for why people don't start out so good, where do we get our goodness from? We'll talk about God. Who is God? And is he as benevolent as we think? Is he so intelligent as we believe? And what is the design of the universe? Is it as intricate as we believe it is? What do you believe, and what have you found in this book? We'll talk about that when we come back. Lots of interesting stuff in this book, folks. Again, I encourage you to pick it up. We have a link in the description of this program. The book is A Purpose-Driven God. Dr. Bo Kirkwood is our guest. When we come back, good and evil, where did it come from, and who exactly is God? When we come back, more with Dr. Bo Kirkwood right here on the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Our guest is Dr. Bo Kirkwood. The book is a wonderful one, folks. A Purpose-Driven God. We're talking about how you can believe both in a higher power and in science. Surprise! It's kind of a wonderful thing. It's an excellent book, folks. I highly encourage you to go get it. We have a link in the description of this program. Dr. Kirkwood, when we left people before the break, we were talking about good and evil, basic concepts, a yin and a yang that, I'll tell you an interesting story here. And I know we're going into, as a Christian, we're going into an area that you probably don't dabble in a lot, but in our realm here in the paranormal, people seek out psychics, and I know that's probably forbidden in your realm.
They seek out what?
Psychics, psychic mediums.
Okay.
to talk to the other side if they're grieving and want to talk to a loved one. Psychics don't tend to see evil on the other side, which I think is a big no-no. I think it's being masked from them personally. There are some psychics that say, no, I definitely see evil, demons, whatever over there. I protect myself. I stay far away from it. Okay. those I tend to think are the ones who are highly enlightened and know everything and see all on the other side. The ones who say, oh, I don't see any evil over there, I think are running around with blinders on. Okay. That's just me. That's
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. But I definitely know, you're talking to a Catholic altar boy here. I definitely know that there's good and evil, and I've seen it. I've been on site on deliverances. I know I've seen evil. I've seen a bottle of holy water just disappear. I've smelled smells. I've heard growls. I know it exists. I know it's there.
You're talking about the demon world.
The demon world. I know it's there.
I believe that too.
Yeah. Now, in the book, as we stated before, you state that people don't generally start out as good, and there's an example in the book, which is a really good example when you talk about children. Children don't start out sharing. They don't look at, and some people may argue this, but kids don't start out by looking at another kid and going, here's half of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If a kid reaches over to go, I want half of that sandwich, I go, no, mine. Or I want to play with that toy. It's no, mine. And you see this in the animal world too. I'll tell you this, Doctor, a lot of my listeners know this. I have trained chipmunks. I've trained chipmunks in the front yard. I've got 5 of them.
Wow.
And I've trained them to hand feed. And I love them all, right? And they probably look at me as God, although I'm not.
Right.
I'm very kind, very benevolent. I've given them all names. I feed them. I never gave birth to them. But, I love them all. I love them all the same. And I let them be wild. They do their own thing. I don't make them do anything. But when they come up to me, they get a peanut, right?
Right.
Or an almond. And every once in a while, I'll pet them on the backside, give them a little love. But if they run into their mother in the wild, their mother will attack them. If they run into each other in the wild, they attack each other. But it's a survival instinct. They're solitary creatures. And it's not meant out of malice. It's meant out of survival.
Right.
And that's nature.
Yeah. By the way, your chipmunks are my horses.
Yeah.
I raise quarter horses here in Southeast Texas. And when you're feeding them, there is a hierarchy. You better feed the dominant one first, or she's going to bite, or
Yes.
she's going to kick one of the other horses. And it's almost comical, but it's that hierarchy. But it's right. It's a survival thing.
There's a hierarchy in my yard too. There's a mama that's out there that rules the yard, and then there's the kids.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's nature. That is nature. And
But why? Here's the question, though. Why? Now, individually, I understand it. The individual horse wants to survive. But, the evolutionists want to talk about the perpetuation of the species. I guarantee you, my dominant horse, her name happens to be Holly. Mm-hmm. Holly doesn't care at all about perpetuating the equine species, not one bit at all. Mm-hmm. What Holly is concerned about is herself and her little foal that she has right now, mm-hmm. because she just gave birth. She cares about that, which brings up another question I bring out in the book: the maternal instinct. Why is there a maternal instinct? Why would an animal care about their baby? But they do. Mm-hmm. They do, and I think again I go back to the design argument, but. Anyway, I digress a little bit there, but I understand what you're talking about with your monkeys, because I see it with these horses I have here on our farm.
But this is all tying into good and evil, and that's this. That is, okay. The maternal instinct is a good instinct. It's pure. It's I want to see this baby through to the point where it's adult and ready to raise itself.
That's right.
Where does it come from? If we're not good in nature, or good natured up until a certain point, if we're not willing to raise our own, because there are some that eat their own. There's an evil in nature there.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So there's duality even in nature.
Yes.
Where does it come from?
Yes.
From
I'm going to speak from a human standpoint. Okay,
Sure, please.
I believe, and by the way, this topic we're talking about is probably one of the most difficult topics to address, because I'm not going to say I have all the answers here at all, but I believe, at least from a human standpoint, and even from Satan's standpoint, we were created with the ability to choose. It's called free will. Mm-hmm. And you have the ability to choose what you do. It's free will. Now, if you're a materialist, free will smacks right up against the materialist and said there's no such thing. Because if all I am is a product of the chemicals that are reacting in my brain, then there is absolutely no reason to have any free will. And if you go back to their argument, they have to fall back on that. But they have to use their free will to try to convince me there isn't a free will. So there's a problem right there. I think God created, the designer created human beings with the idea of free will. He didn't have to do it that way. We could all be just chemical reactions. But I believe therein lieth the problem, so to speak, with free will, because we have the real will to do right and we have the will to do wrong. Now, some would argue, who defines that? If you're a moral relativist, you think that the community defines what's right and wrong. That has its problems. If you just think about that logically, if the community or each government determines right or wrong, then how are you going to argue against Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 1940s? How are you going to argue against that?
Yeah.
That community, apparently, at least they let it happen. Let's put it that way, either tacitly or untacitly, they let it happen. That's moral relativism, and I don't believe in moral relativism. I think there's implanted in us a knowledge of good and evil. Murder in all societies is wrong. Rape, thievery, I could go on and on. Where does that come from? I believe it's implanted in us, and I think it's implanted in our design by our designer. But we have the ability to choose which one to do. We're not forced to do either one. That God has left that up to us to decide. The higher being has left that up for us to decide. And unfortunately, there's another side of the equation. There's a bad side that also is there to try to entice us to do what's evil. And as I said, I've got one chapter in my book called The Dark Side, which I'm sure you read. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the past history of mankind, it's unbelievable what man has done to man. Mm-hmm. The 20th century was probably the most evil century ever. Mm-hmm. More people died, evil deaths, horrible deaths at the hands of evil people than any century. The 20th century seems to be starting off a tad better, but we're still only one fourth of the way into it, and we're already seeing some evil perpetuated throughout the globe, and even in this country, obviously. That just tells you there has to be that duality. There's the evil that exists out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I want to ask you is this, and I want to focus not just on Christianity, but all religions, because there seems to be, no matter what religion you believe in, there seems to be a messenger, or not necessarily a prophet, but someone who speaks through God, whether it be someone who's the Son of God, or it's someone who speaks through God, someone who believes they speak through God, someone who speaks through the Creator. But it seems universal in all religions. So my question is this: as we're getting, we're probably about 15, 17 minutes away from the end of the program here. I want to start to focus on not only messengers, but how we get this message from God. And then I want to talk a little bit about God himself. And do we have the wrong impression of what God is? I want to talk first about the messengers and how we're getting the message. We talked a little bit in the first part of the program about, intelligent design and how this planet, is set up for us. But someone had to get a message at one time. I mean, we kind of, it seems like we're kind of getting the download that, we shouldn't be doing bad things. We shouldn't murder. We shouldn't steal. We shouldn't be doing the basic things.
Correct.
But someone had to get a download of, well, here's how we build a car, or here's how we do this. Are we getting it through telepathy, Dr. Kirkwood, or are you thinking that God is outwardly sending a prophet or outwardly sending someone to verbally speak and say, you know what? Are they getting direct messages, first of all? Is the Creator directly speaking to people? And are those people directly speaking to others?
I'm going to give you my opinion here.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And again, you prefaced it already, but I come from a Judeo-Christian point of view. Early on, the prophets were the spokesmen for God. God spoke through Moses, and then through other prophets that came down and spoke to Abraham as well, even before the law of Moses was established. When there was law, by the way, it just wasn't law that was written down on stones, a tablet, or so forth. It was written in the hearts of man. But there was still law. But early on, he spoke through those prophets. How that happened, I can't sit here and tell you telepathically, possibly, but the Bible says that it was inspired. God breathed. That's what the word inspiration means. So it was inspired in those spokesmen for God. How did the early Jews know if it was a true spokesman for God? There was a real easy test, and it's spoken about in the Old Testament, and that is if what the prophet spoke came true. Pretty good sign he was speaking from God. He or she was speaking from God. If what they spoke didn't come true, pretty good chance that what they were speaking wasn't from God. Mm-hmm. And then in these latter days, the Bible says he now speaks to us through Jesus Christ. How does he do that? Again, through the inspired word, through the writers of the New Testament, through the writers of the Old Testament. That word is inspired. I believe it was handed down from God. Again, the exact mechanism, don't know that, but somehow, either telepathically or somehow, those words entered. For example, the writer Luke, who wrote the book of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles, somehow that was transcribed, and then now we have that written word. Now, it's my opinion. Again, I'm going to give my opinion here, but I do not believe he speaks telepathically to us that way anymore. The book of Jude says that it was once delivered for all. We have it now. And if someone did speak from God today and claim that they were speaking directly from God today, I would want to see proof of that. And the fact that, what they're saying comes true is if they can prophesy things ahead of time that come true, not just predict, but I mean absolutely prophesy, then I might have more belief in that. But my belief is that's not happening today. God has spoken through us, through the Holy Spirit, in the words that are written down that each one of us can read. He is not a respecter of persons. And the Bible has been translated into virtually every known language of the world, just about. And so that is my belief. Now, these other so-called spokesmen for God, I have questions about whether or not they truly were spokesmen for God or not.
Yeah. You know, Dr. Kirkwood, it kind of hits me as you're talking about that. You know, they always say from the mouths of babes, right? I never believe someone who's a loudmouth who says they're speaking for God. I always think if it ever drops out from someone, it's someone who's unassuming, who it just kind of falls out and it hits the world and they go, oh, wow. And it's someone who's not necessarily loud, brash, and abrasive, but it's someone who's unassuming, maybe someone who is humble, maybe someone who is not as well known, but is, has managed to grab a bit of a spotlight for a moment and was meant to deliver a message. And they get that message out and they fade back into the background.
Yeah.
And that's how that
message is something different than I can read about in my New Testament, I would question, especially if it contradicts it. I personally am a little bit worried about someone that talks about how God speaks to them all the time.
I am too. Yeah.
That would worry me. I don't think God, I don't think God micromanages the world. I don't think God micromanages my life. He doesn't tell me what I'm going to do tomorrow, what shirt I'm going to wear, what food I'm going to eat. That's not my belief.
Right.
It doesn't micromanage us that well. But when someone tells me, well, God told me to do X, Y, or Z, really directly told you that, I'm a bit concerned about that.
I would.
I have not heard those voices. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, if someone's hearing those voices, I would.
He hasn't spoken to me in that way. Does he speak to us today? Yes, I believe he does speak to us today. But I believe it's through the written word. That's the way I believe.
Yeah, if he's telling you how to run your daily agenda, I think you probably want to go in and seek some medication. I think at that point.
People believe that. Yeah, there's people believe. I got this great parking spot at the supermarket because God reserved it for me today because he knew my knee was hurting. Really? I don't think so.
No. So in the book, and we don't have to get too deep into it because I'd like people to read it in the book, but you kind of, we'll blush over it just briefly as we start to wrap up here. You go over what you believe this intelligent creator or who God really is. Who do you believe God really is?
Well, I believe the creator of the universe was identified for us in the book of John. And the book of John begins that the Word was with God and the Word was God, and through everything the Word was created. That word, which by the way comes from the word logos, which also implies logic and intelligence, was Jesus Christ. That's what the book of John says. Now, again, is it a faith based upon a blind faith that I believe that? No, I believe the eyewitnesses. I believe that the gospel accounts were accounts of eyewitnesses. I believe that the Apostle Paul, for example, said there were at least 500 people alive when he wrote his epistle that saw or had seen the risen Savior. Now, they could have been delusional. That's possible. But here's what we know from the history, not from the Bible necessarily, but from the historical record that we have. All but one of the apostles died a martyr's life. Either executed or burned at the stake or sawn asunder, you name it. So did most of the early Christians, or many of the early Christians. Many of those 500 that said that they saw the risen Savior that were still alive died deaths believing what they believed. So if they were delusional, they went to their death believing a delusion. Worse yet, if they weren't delusional but just were lying about it, they went to their death believing a lie. That is very illogical to me. That would be the case. So I believe the eyewitnesses. I believe that there was a physical resurrection of the dead, that one being Jesus Christ, and that he is going to come again. But he is the creator. He's identified in the book of John as the creator of the universe. God turned over creation to him. So when you read in the book of Genesis that in the beginning God created, you're talking about Jesus Christ there. Now with the Godhead, if you believe in the Trinity, which I happen to believe as well, God was one person, but three different personalities. And one of those came to this earth, and I believe is Jesus Christ. Now Jesus didn't expect people to believe him on his word. Okay. People run today that say, I'm Jesus Christ. They're delusional. I would say prove it. Well, Jesus did prove it. He proved it by miracles that were witnessed by people, from the raising of the dead to turning the water into wine to walking on the water to many, many others. And the book of John also said he did so many miracles that he just didn't have the space to include them all in his gospel. But yet he didn't expect a blind faith when he walked this earth. And so he doesn't expect us to have a blind faith either. My faith is based upon the testimony of many, many witnesses.
All right. Well, there you go. I think that's a good place for us to start to wrap up the program. So we know who God is. We know there's a duality in this world. We know that this world had to have been designed. It can't be just a mechanism. But from what we've said here today, I know there's a lot of people out there who probably still don't believe, that may be going, well, Tim, you really didn't make the case with us sitting here. Of course we didn't make the case, because there's this whole book here, and if you're watching on video, I'm holding it up right now. There's almost 250 pages for you to read that make the case. I can't go over all 250 pages for you. But the scientific case itself is expansive, and Dr. Kirkwood makes it brilliantly. Again, going over everything from the process of our bodies to the animal kingdom to scientific theories, everything from relativity to, you name it, chaos theory to, string theory to dark matter to quantum physics to, everything is tied together. Photosynthesis. There's so much in here, Dr. Kirkwood, to tie everything together as to why this earth was intelligently made for us. The only thing I would bring up, and I'll bring this up, and I want your thoughts on it before we leave people today, is this. There are some people, Zachariah Stitchin in particular, I believe, who claim that there's one thing that would keep us from believing that this world might not have been made for us. I'm going to throw a wacky theory at you here, Dr. Kirkwood. Strap yourself in. That we might have been transplanted from another planet here by another intelligent race. Reason being, and this is the only factor, that the gravity is maybe a little too heavy for us. This would be the reason why. Because apes can jump out of a tree, land perfectly fine, and not shatter a bone or tear a ligament or tear a muscle. We try to jump out of a tree and land. We'll break a bone, we'll tear a muscle, we'll tear a ligament. That the gravity, the fact that the earth is maybe a little too heavy for us might suggest that maybe this isn't quite the natural environment for us, that maybe we were transplanted here, that maybe we might have belonged on Mars, but Mars lost its atmosphere. And it's
pretty far out there.
That is kind
birds can fly. Birds can fly too, and I can't fly. That doesn't really prove anything. But the idea that we were planted here, by the way, from some other planet, is very old. In fact, Watson and Crick, Francis Crick, came up with the idea of panspermia, is what he called it. Kind of a funny name.
Yeah.
But when he realized how complicated the DNA molecule was, he realized that it couldn't self-assemble. So what was his explanation? It came from outer space. That was his legitimate theory. And you're talking about a Nobel Prize winning biologist there, and Francis Crick, who co-discovered the molecule of DNA. That's how complicated he knew DNA was. Well, even if that were true, what does it do? It just transplants the creator from this earth to another planet, and we came here from another planet. I personally don't think that's what happened. But that argument that there's a limit how far those apes could jump, let me tell you, if they jumped from the Empire State Building, they would not survive. That ain't going to happen. Yeah. So there is a limit. So the apes are adapted better to jump from a tree to a tree and can fall and not hurt themselves. That proves nothing. There's animals that can do things that you and I cannot do, and my horses are one of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, that proves nothing to me.
Yeah,
but it sounds interesting.
It does. It's an interesting theory, but again, a theory. Yeah. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well. So,
Thank you.
The book is A Purpose-Driven God. Dr. Bo Kirkwood has been our guest. Again, link in the description of the program. I highly encourage you to go get this book. And again, it's one of those things. We got to make ourselves uncomfortable in order to think, learn, grow. I want you to go out, get this book, read it, and get yourself into a different space. And think about whether you can merge the two. Can you merge believing in a higher power along with science? Some of you out there believe just in the science, don't believe in the higher power. Some of you believe in the higher power, don't necessarily believe in the science. I want you to mix your chocolate with your peanut butter and see how much maybe you buy completely into Dr. Kirkwood's book. Maybe you believe in some of it. I want you to go out and get the book and let me know, tim@darknessradio.com, what you think of the book. Dr. Kirkwood, I want to thank you so much for being with us today on the program.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Want to thank Dr. Bo Kirkwood for being on the program. A Purpose-Driven God is available right now in the description of the program. Again, folks, chocolate in the peanut butter in the chocolate. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but I truly do believe that you can look into the subject at least, whether you're a skeptic, whether you're a believer, whether you're a cynic. whether you're an atheist or whether you're a true believer, I mean, you believe in everything, or whether you're a staunch religious believer, and you can say to yourself, you know what, I can buy into this a little bit. I can see where Dr. Kirkwood is coming from. I read the book, and there is a few things. There's just maybe one or two things that I look at what Dr. Kirkwood has to say. And again, you really have to launch into the book and read every single thing in the book. That I look at what Dr. Kirkwood says and I go, you know what? I can't agree with that. But for the most part, I find what he says fascinating. Not saying I buy into it wholeheartedly. Now keep this in mind, folks, when I pull these topics for you, and I want you to look into things. A lot of times when I pull a topic for you, I want you to look at it. I want you to look at it and just go, interesting. Interesting thought. And just kind of put it in your lexicon. Let it roll around your head for a little bit. Kind of like a wine tasting. You let it roll around your mouth a little bit, see how it tastes. If you don't like it, spit it out. You don't have to do it again, right? But if you savor the flavor a little bit and you kind of like how it tastes, maybe you go back and try it again. Maybe it's something you subscribe to. Maybe it's something you put into your wine cellar. Maybe it's something you come back to a little bit later. Something I think you might subscribe to. Got to tell you, last night I sat down with Greg over at Ghostbox Radio and the crew over there. Had a really great time with Greg. Want to thank him so much for his hospitality and for just sitting down and giving me the privilege of just kind of chewing the fat. And really, we didn't get around to too much paranormal stuff, but that's okay. Every once in a while, it's just kind of fun to talk broadcasting and talking about a little bit of the paranormal, and looking forward to maybe some more visits with Ghostbox Radio. I encourage you to check them out, ghostboxradio.com or even am950radio.com. I was operations manager over at AM950 Radio a long time ago, a different lifetime ago. But check out Greg over at AM950 and ghostboxradio.com. Encourage you to do that as well. Also, before the weekend comes up, check out the store, please. My car broke down, and I'm not much of a beggar or a pleader, but I got to get this car fixed, and I've got I really do. I'm on my hands and knees. You can't see it because it's audio, but this is me begging right now for your help. Help a brother out, please, and get something in return. Check out some of the items at the store, darknessradioshow.com. I've got a link in the description of this program. And help a brother out. I need my car so I can go to my doctor appointments. Just saying. Otherwise, I wish you all a very good weekend. I hope you have a nice weekend. We're coming up on fall already. A lot of your kids are back in school. I hate to think of that as well. I remember when we used to have full summers. Remember that? You could go out and run around until Labor Day. Whatever happened to that? I wish that would still be a thing. I don't know. It's sad, really. I won't get negative on the bit. I want y'all to have a very good weekend. I want to remind you guys, Michigan Paracon is next weekend. If you don't have your tickets, check out the link in the description of this program. Get your tickets. It's not too late. It's the very last one. The end of an era. I'm going to be there. Mally Fox will be there. Come check us out, please. Come say hi. Come get a hug. Come hang out with us. We're looking forward to seeing you. In the meantime, be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. Help out wherever you can. Or just keep somebody company this weekend. That's what we ask. Okay? Also, end of the month, another birthday. I'm coming up on my birthday. I didn't get the chance to say happy birthday to Eric Altman, who is our Monster Watch correspondent. His birthday was Monday, so I want to wish Eric Altman a very happy birthday. I want to say happy birthday to you, brother. I didn't get a chance to say it on social media when it was your birthday. Love you and appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for everything you do. All right, that'll do it. Go have a good weekend. We've got some really good shows coming up next week. And, of course, looking forward to seeing you at Michigan Paracon. Have a great one, everybody. We'll see you next week for the best in true crime and paranormal programming. This is Darkness Radio.